Imagine a world where every seventh year, the land lies fallow, untouched, and unworked. No seeds are sown, no crops are harvested, and no vineyards are pruned. In this year, the land itself is given a rest, a sabbath, just as the people who work it are commanded to rest on the seventh day of the week. This is the year of the Sabbath for the land, a concept that might seem strange or even impractical in our modern, fast-paced world. But in ancient Israel, this practice was not just a religious ritual. It was a fundamental part of their social, economic, and ecological system. The Sabbath year was just the beginning. Every 7 Sabbath years, a total of 49 years, a special year was declared, the Jubilee. In the Jubilee year, all debts were forgiven, slaves were set free, and land that had been sold returned to its original owners. This radical system, laid out in the book of Leviticus, was designed to prevent the accumulation of wealth and power in the hands of a few, to ensure that every member of the community had a fair chance at prosperity, and to maintain the balance and health of the land itself. The story of the Sabbath and the Jubilee begins on Mount Sinai, where God spoke to Moses, instructing him to convey these laws to the Israelites. The Sabbath year was a time for the land to rest, to regenerate, and to be replenished. For 6 years, the people were allowed to farm their fields and tend their vineyards. But in the 7th year, they were commanded to let the land lie fallow. This was not just a break from labor. It was a divine command, a reminder that the land belongs to God and not to any individual. The Sabbath year was a way to acknowledge that everything they had, including the land, was a gift from God, and they were stewards, not owners. The concept of the Sabbath year extended beyond just the land. In the Sabbath year, the people were also commanded to forgive debts. This was a radical idea in a world where debt could lead to slavery and the loss of one's land. By forgiving debts, the community was able to prevent the cycle of poverty and debt that could otherwise trap families for generations. The Sabbath year was a time of renewal, not just for the land but for the entire community. But the Sabbath year was just the beginning. Every 7 Sabbath years, a total of 49 years, the Jubilee year was declared. The Jubilee was a time of profound transformation. On the Day of Atonement, the 10th day of the 7th month, a ram's horn was sounded throughout the land, signaling the start of the Jubilee. This was a call to action, a reminder to all the people that the time had come for a great release. In the Jubilee year, all debts were forgiven, and all slaves were set free. This was not just a symbolic gesture. It was a real and practical measure to ensure that no one would be permanently enslaved or impoverished. The Jubilee year was a time when the land that had been sold returned to its original owners. This meant that even if a family had fallen on hard times and had to sell their land to survive, they would not lose it forever. In the Jubilee year, they would have a chance to start over, to reclaim their heritage, and to rebuild their lives. The laws of the Jubilee were designed to prevent the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few. In a society where land was the primary source of wealth, the Jubilee ensured that no one could accumulate more land than they could reasonably use. This prevented the rise of a class of wealthy landowners, who could exploit the poor and the vulnerable. Instead, the Jubilee created a system of checks and balances, ensuring that the distribution of land and resources remained relatively equal. The Jubilee was also a time of celebration. The land was given a rest, and the people were given a chance to reflect on their relationship with God and with each other. It was a time to remember that they were all part of a larger community, bound together by a common heritage and a shared responsibility to care for the land and for one another. The Jubilee was a time to reaffirm the values of justice, equity, and compassion that were at the heart of their faith. But the Jubilee was not just a religious ideal. It was a practical solution to real social and economic problems. In a world where the gap between the rich and the poor was often vast, the Jubilee provided a mechanism to level the playing field. It ensured that no one would be permanently trapped in poverty, and that everyone would have a fair chance to succeed. The Jubilee was a way to prevent the kind of social unrest and inequality that can lead to conflict and division. The laws of the Jubilee also had a profound ecological dimension. By requiring the land to lie fallow every 7 years, and by giving it a longer rest every 50 years, the Israelites were ensuring that the land remained fertile and productive. This was not just a matter of religious observance. It was a matter of survival. In a region where the land was often arid and the climate was harsh, the Sabbath and the Jubilee were essential for maintaining the health and productivity of the land. The Jubilee was a radical idea, and it is easy to see why it might have been difficult to implement. The idea of forgiving debts and returning land to its original owners would have been challenging for those who had accumulated wealth and power. But the Jubilee was not just a set of laws. It was a way of life. It was a way of thinking about the world and one's place in it. It was a way of understanding that everything we have is a gift, and that we are all called to use our gifts for the common good. In our modern world, the principles of the Jubilee are still relevant. We still face issues of wealth inequality, social injustice, and environmental degradation. The idea of a Sabbath year where we give the land a rest and forgive debts might seem impractical, but it is a reminder that we need to take a step back and reflect on our relationship with the earth and with each other. The Jubilee is a call to action, a reminder that we are all part of a larger community, and that we have a responsibility to care for the earth and for one another. The Jubilee is a call to justice, a call to equity, and a call to compassion. It is a call to remember that we are all connected, that we are all part of a larger whole, and that we are all called to work for the common good. In a world that can often seem divided and broken, the principles of the Jubilee offer a vision of a better future, a future where everyone has a chance to thrive, and where the earth is cared for and protected. In conclusion, the Sabbath and the Jubilee are more than just ancient laws. They are a timeless reminder of the values that can make our world a better place.